Acute hyponatremia. Hypo meaning low. Natri meaning pertaining to sodium, or more formally natrium, as is shown by its symbol on the periodic table of elements. And emia meaning presence in blood. Low sodium presence in blood. Acute meaning that there are no underlying pathophysiologic conditions that are leading to this problem with hematemesis, the vomiting of blood. Hypovolemic shock. A drop in blood flow due to low blood volume. Hepatic encephalopathy, disorder of the brain because of the liver. Septicemia. Septic is an old word meaning putrid, but more commonly meaning bacteria, and emia meaning presence in blood. Bacterial presence in blood. Hypokalemia. Hypo meaning low. Kali referring to potassium, or more formally kalium, as is shown by its symbol on the periodic table of elements. And emia meaning presence in blood. Low potassium presence in blood. Rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdo meaning striated, or in this case, skeletal. Myo meaning muscle, and lysis meaning breakdown. Skeletal muscle breakdown. Bradycardia is very typical in patients like MJ. Brady meaning slow, and cardia referring to heart rate. Slow heart rate typically defined as under 60 beats per minute. Hypophosphatemia. Hypo meaning low. Phosphate referring to the important anion that exists mainly inside of your cells, and emia meaning presence in blood. Low phosphate presence in blood. Muscle atrophy. A meaning without, and trophy referring to nourishment. Dyspnea. Dys meaning abnormal, and nea meaning breath. Hematuria, the urination of blood. Hydronephrosis. Hydro meaning water. Nephro meaning kidney, and osis meaning abnormal state. Allograft. Allo meaning different, and graft meaning tissue. Encephalitis. Encephal meaning brain, and itis meaning inflammation. Cytostasis on T and B lymphocytes. Cyto meaning cell, and stasis meaning unchanging. Bradyzoids. Brady meaning slow, and zoid meaning common organism. Did upper extremity dysmetria. Dys meaning wrong, and metria meaning length. Her movements in the limbs above her waist were uncoordinated, with intended positioning often missing the target at varying lengths. Similarly, she had ataxic gait. A meaning without, and taxic meaning order. Gait being her walk. It was awkward, imbalanced, disorderly. Generalized tonic-clonic. Tonic and clonic deriving from ancient Greek words tonos and klonus, which mean to stretch with violent and confused motion. Generalized meaning that the seizure, which is a state of excessive excitation, is affecting the entire brain. Metabolic acidosis. Osis meaning abnormal state, and acid being a chemical that donates hydrogen ions, something when in large abundance can impair the normal function of your body. Metabolic meaning that it's deriving from cellular processes that produce energy or break down substances. With a pH of 6.5, we can conclude that CS is suffering from profound acidemia, an acid presence in blood. Hyperemia, or an abundant presence of blood, was found in CS's eye. Liquefactive necrosis. Osis meaning abnormal state. Necro meaning death, and liquefactive meaning as the tissue dies, it sloughs off into a liquid pus, disintegrating the lining of the esophagus as it rolls down into the stomach. Coagulation necrosis, a state of death marked by clotted blood blocking the flow of oxygen and choking the cells. Hypoxemia. Hypo meaning low. Ox referring to oxygen, and emia meaning presence in blood. Low oxygen presence in blood. Tachycardia. Tachy meaning fast, and cardia referring to heart rate. Tachypnic meaning his respiratory rate is much higher than normal. Hydrophilic end. Hydro meaning water, and philic meaning affinity for. Glucosuria, or sugar in his urine. This was combined with his polydipsia, his unquenchable thirst, and polyuria, his frequent urination. Hyperglycemic crisis. Hyper meaning high. Glyce, referring to glucose or sugar, the primary source of energy for cells, and emia, meaning presence in blood. High glucose presence in blood, and crisis, meaning that there was an underlying cascade of events that brought about CJ's metabolic derangement. Hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state. Hyperosmolar, describing the chemistry responsible for what's happening. Septicemia, a bacterial presence in blood. Intracranial aneurysms, which are structural weaknesses along the walls of blood vessels. Intracranial, meaning that these arteries were in the brain and have been bulging along weakened walls for some time, and they were ripe for rupture. Subarachnoid hemorrhage. a bursting of blood in the subarachnoid space where the rupture occurred in the brain. Antifibrinolytic therapy. Fibrin referring to the final protein that forms blood clots. Lytic meaning breaking down of, and anti meaning against. A medicine that prevents clot breakdown. Delayed cerebral ischemia, a starving of blood in her cerebrum that's delayed in onset. Cerebral vasospasm, meaning that the blood vessels in the brain begin to constrict, and as they begin to narrow, less blood flows through the brain, meaning less oxygen is going to the tissue. Explaining the term delayed cerebral ischemia, euvolemic or at a normal body water status. Acanthosis nigricans. Acantha in ancient Greek referring to spines, or in this case, the stratum spinosum layer of the skin. Osis meaning disease of, and nigricans referring to a blackening. Serum aminotransferase. Serum referring to the amber-colored liquid that separates out when blood coagulates, and aminotransferase being an important liver enzyme. Hyperandrogenemia. Hyper meaning high. Androgen referring to male hormones, mainly testosterone, and emia meaning presence in blood. High male hormone presence in blood, endocrinopathy, a disease centered on hormones. Hyperinsulinemia, high insulin presence in blood. Bilateral sclerocystic ovaries. Sclero meaning hardened. Cystic referring to cyst, which is an abnormal sac containing fluid, and bilateral meaning on both sides. Congenital adrenal hyperplasia, a genetically linked overgrowth of the adrenal glands which can overproduce androgens. Venous thromboembolism, which are large blood clots that can develop silently. Hypercalcemia. Hyper meaning high. Calci, short for calcium, which is an essential electrolyte, and emia meaning presence in blood. High calcium presence in blood. Osteoclast formation. Osteo meaning bone, and clast from ancient Greek klastos meaning broken. Hypermetabolic lymph nodes in that region. Hyper meaning high. Metabolic referring to cellular division, and lymph nodes denoting the structures in your body where white blood cells from your immune system accumulate and drain. Metastatic melanoma. Melan referring to melanin. Oma meaning tumor or irregular mass, describing the type of cancer that's growing on KC, and metastatic meaning that even though he had originally cut out the cancer himself, it has transcended its stationary site of origin and has started spreading all throughout his body. Acute megacolon. Mega meaning enlargement and referring to the dilatation of the colon or the large intestines. Acute meaning that there are no underlying pathophysiologic conditions that are leading to this problem. Acidemia, a major acid presence in blood. Acute hypernatremia. Hyper meaning high. Natri referring to sodium, or more formally natrium, as indicated by its symbol on the periodic table of elements, and emia meaning presence in blood. High sodium presence in blood. Acute, meaning that there were no underlying pathophysiologic conditions that are leading to this problem. Tonicity. Tonic, from ancient Greek tonos, meaning to stretch, but in this context referring to tension, a tension of water due to the presence of sodium. Dysarthria. Dys meaning wrong, and arthria from ancient Greek arthron meaning articulation. Her ability to articulate words in speech is absent. This was combined with dysphagia, an inability to swallow, and a flaccid quadriplegia. Quadri, from Latin quator, denoting the quantity of four, referring to 2 arms and 2 legs, and plegia, from ancient Greek plesin, meaning disabled. Flaccid, meaning that she's floppy with no muscle tone. Central pontine myelinolysis. Lysis, meaning breaking down of myelin, the conductive sheath covering nerve cells, and central pontine, referring to the central pons where the brain connects to the brainstem to deliver nerve impulses throughout the body. Hypoglycemia. Hypo, meaning low. Glyce, from ancient Greek glycis, meaning sweet, referring to sugar, and emia, meaning presence in blood. Low sugar presence in blood. Splanchnic arteries. From ancient Greek splanchnikos, meaning entrails. Microvesicular steatosis, that is, small vesicles of fat that had accumulated inside his liver. Ataxia. A meaning without, and taxia meaning order. Tetravalent cation. Tetra meaning 4. Valent, from Latin valentia, meaning capacity, and cation meaning a positive charge, like something that you see on batteries. Hypocalcemia. Hypo meaning low. Calci, referring to calcium, and emia, meaning presence in blood. Low calcium, presence in blood. Acidemia, an acid presence in blood, called pre-renal azotemia. Azote, an old term referring to nitrogen, and emia again meaning presence in blood. A nitrogen presence in blood. Pre-renal, meaning that there's something wrong in his body that's preventing the blood flow to his kidneys. Acute, massive pulmonary embolism. Embolus, from ancient Greek meaning a wedge, or in this case referring to a blood clot. Pulmonary, meaning lung, and massive, referring not to the size of the actual clot, but to the sudden hemodynamic collapse that it caused in DC. A blood clot wedged into the artery, going into the lungs, causing his heart to disfigure, causing his heart to stop beating because it is disfigured, causing his organs to shut down because they're no longer receiving oxygen due to the fact that his heart has stopped beating. Acute, meaning that he didn't have any underlying medical issues leading to this problem. Anemia, and meaning without, and emia, meaning presence of blood. Bacteremia, or bacterial presence in blood. Hematuria, there is now a presence of blood in her urine. Osteomyelitis. Osteo, meaning bone. Myelo, referring to marrow, and itis, meaning inflammation, or in this case, infection. A bone infection. Macrocytic anemia. And meaning without, and emia meaning presence of blood. Leber, hereditary optic neuropathy. Neuro, referring to the nerves. Opathy meaning a disorder, and optic referring to the eye. A disorder of the nerves of the eyes. Etiologies. There's a lot of CYA in medicine, and this is a very clear example of it. Hypoglycemia. Hypo meaning low. Glyce from ancient Greek glykes, referring to sugar, and emia meaning presence in blood. Low sugar presence in blood. Anemia, and meaning without, and emia meaning presence of blood. There was something wrong with her red blood cells. Hypercupremia. Hyper meaning high. Cupro from Latin cuprum, derived from Greek Kypros, which is Cyprus in English, an island that has rich stores of metal, and emia meaning presence in blood. High copper presence in blood. Ataxic gait. A meaning without, and taxic meaning order. Gait being her walk. It was awkward, imbalanced, disorderly. Lymphocytopenia. Lympho derived from Latin lympha, the goddess of water, and today referring to a type of white blood cell that fights infection. Cyto meaning cell, and penia meaning a deficiency of. A deficiency of white blood cells that fight infection. Thrombocytopenia. Thrombo from ancient Greek thrombus, meaning a piece or a lump, today referring to a blood clot, a deficiency of blood clot cells. Bacteremia, or bacterial presence in blood. Tissue ischemia. Isk from an old Greek word meaning to restrain, and emia meaning presence of blood. A restrained presence of blood in the tissues. Rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdo meaning striped, referring to the look of skeletal muscle, and lysis meaning a breaking down of. An extreme breakdown of skeletal muscle as the tissue leaks its remains into his bloodstream. Chronic hyponatremia. Hypo meaning low. Natri referring to sodium, or more formally natrium, as shown by its symbol on the periodic table of elements, and emia meaning presence in blood. Low sodium presence in blood. Chronic, meaning that this has been developing on a time scale of several weeks now. Hypokalemia, or low potassium presence in blood. Beer potomania. Poto from an ancient Greek word meaning to drink, and mania referring in this case to an excess, is a hypotonic hyponatremia that is causing all of JW's problems. Dysmetria. Dys meaning wrong, and metria meaning length. Similarly, he had dysdiadochokinesia, meaning that his ability to perform rapid alternative movements was compromised. Hypoxemia. Hypo meaning low. Ox referring to oxygen, and emia meaning presence in blood. Low oxygen presence in blood. ST elevation. Myocardial infarction. Myo meaning muscle. Cardia from ancient Greek referring to the heart. Infarction from Latin farcire, meaning to stuff into, and more modernly meaning a blockage of blood flow, causing cell death. Death of heart muscle due to a blockage of blood flow, and ST elevation referring to the ECG reading that he has a specific change in the electricity of his heart, meaning that he's having a heart attack. Hyperlipidemia. Hyper meaning high. Lipid referring to fats, and emia meaning presence in blood. High fat presence in blood. Isopropyl alcohol. Iso meaning equal. Propan, which is a prefix denoting the quantity of 3 and referring to the number of carbons, and alcohol meaning a chemical moiety of 1 oxygen bound to 1 hydrogen, alcohol dehydrogenase. D meaning the removal of hydrogen, and ase describing an enzyme which is a protein that does chemical reactions. Acidemia, acid presence in blood. In vivo, from Latin meaning inside life.